In this Elden Ring video, I'm going to be showing you my Dragonscale Daimyo build. This is a New Game Plus build that focuses on the use of the Dragonscale Blade and its weapon skill Ice Lightning Sword, which is just fucking badass. This weapon skill was buffed in patch 1.07, and now it does even more damage. The duration of the weapon buff went from 20 seconds to 45 seconds, making it extremely viable. And the amount of lightning damage that your weapon was buffed with went from 130 to 160, which is fantastic. But wait, there's more. It's also reduced the time between the skill activation and being able to perform other actions. So you're not going to get locked into the animation as long, or, it's going to animate faster, essentially. This makes the Dragonscale Blade extremely deadly because we have about just under 600 attack rating with the way we're set up with our stats right now. And then when you buff with this, you get 760 attack rating. That's incredibly high for 60-60 stats in a weapon that weighs 5.5. That's like great sword levels of damage, or, some colossal weapons level of damage in a weapon that weighs 5.5, which is awesome. And the weapon skill itself doesn't deal tons of damage. It deals a modest amount, which is fine, but you get that 45-second buff, which is great. And you also get Frostbite buildup on the weapon, which is good. So you're going to be able to apply the Frostbite status effect, and you're going to get this increased damage, making it really, really strong weapon. So what I've done with this build is I've kind of given you options on the way you can play. So what we've done here is we have a Fire Uchi Katana in the left hand, and we have the Jellyfish Shield. So what I like to do with the Fire Katana when I'm playing is I'll buff it with Flaming Strike, giving it extra fire damage, and then I'll have Ice Lightning when I attack with that, and I'll have the lightning buff. This looks cool. You have like a flaming sword in one hand and a lightning in the other, and this allows you to get extra damage from both weapons when you're dual wielding. It allows you to get bleed buildup with the offhand. It allows you to get frostbite buildup with the right hand. And if you do trigger frostbite, and for some reason by that point the enemy's not dead, because you have fire in the left hand, then you can re-trigger frostbite again. It doesn't happen that often, but it's just really a deadly combo. And you can also use something else instead of fire on the left hand. You could use lightning, for instance, and use lightning slash, which is almost identical to Ice Lightning Sword in terms of its animation, and that would give you lightning on both swords. So if you wanted like a gold lightning on the left hand and a blue lightning on the right, you could do that as well. The stat spread would be a little bit different, but it's also an option. On top of that, we also have the Jellyfish Shield here, and that allows you to do block counters, but also using Contagious Fury to buff your damage after you're buffed with Ice Lightning Sword will give you 908 attack rating with the stats that we have here. That is insane for a one-handed weapon that attacks that fast, that weighs that little. So not only can you do block counters, but you can absolutely do crazy amounts of damage, and then when you need to rebuff, you just two-hand Dragonscale Blade, do your Ice Lightning Sword attack, and then go back to, using your Sword Shield and rebuffing yourself with Contagious Fury, which is absolutely fantastic. And enemies also, because Jellyfish Shield is a great shield, they rebuff off it, allowing you to do block counters a lot easier. The guard boost on the Jellyfish Shield isn't amazing, so it's not something you're not gonna like excel at block counters, but you could do them on individual enemies rather easily. And it's a great way to get some extra damage. And it gives you more options, as I mentioned. So you can single hand, you can dual wield, or you can use a shield and a katana, and it works really well no matter what you want to do. Besides that, talking about the armor that I have, I'm using the Okina mask to give me kind of a samurai look and also get the extra 3 dexterity there, which is great. And I'm using Blade's armor set. I've actually altered the chest piece here, so you might not recognize it because it doesn't have the big flowing cloak. I know, it's like a sin to remove that thing. But it looks kind of cool, kind of has like more of a mix between a knight and samurai feel to it, and it's something that kind of distinguishes a little bit. I really like the aesthetic, but something also great about it is it gives you 56 poise. This allows you to tank through most hits, and that's something you're going to need to do with this build when dual wielding. You're going to trade damage a lot of times in order to get your attack power built up through repeated attacks. And in order to use Ice Lightning Sword, there's not really any hyper armor on this. So if you get hit at all where you're doing it, you're going to get staggered out of it. So you're having some poise, like over 51 is almost a necessity for this, or you're going to have difficulty using Ice Lightning Sword. When it comes to my talismans, I have Shard of Alexander to increase the damage of Flaming Strike and Ice Lightning Sword. I have Millicent's Prosthesis to give me 5 more dexterity because this is a quality build, and also to increase our damage as we attack repeatedly. This doesn't matter whether you're single-handing or dual wielding. It's effective either way. And then I have Rotten Wing Sword Insignia here to further, increase the damage as we attack rapidly. If you don't have this one, you can use Winged Sword Insignia. Both are very good. And then your fourth spot is kind of your flex spot. Here, I like to use the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman to give me extra protection, but sometimes you can put like the Claw Talisman on if you're doing jump attacks, or you can put on the Curved Sword Talisman if you find yourself doing block counters. There's really a lot of things. You can put the Ritual Sword Talisman on if you want more damage and you're really not getting hit, depending on your playstyle. I tend to be hyper aggressive, so my health's always going down and up and stuff from potioning and getting hit. Especially with high poise, you can tank through a lot of hits, so I just want to kill things quickly. But depending on how you play, there are a lot of things you can use there. I recommend using the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, but there are a lot of options you could use. I don't recommend using the Lightning Scorpion Charm here, even if you're using like a lightning offhand weapon with the Uchigatana, because you simply don't do that much lightning damage. Most of your damage is physical, so taking that increased damage for like, a 5% increase in damage, or like 40 to 50 more lightning damage, or not even that much, probably like 30, isn't even worth it, in my opinion. So I wouldn't recommend using those for this build. So again, talking about the style of play of this build, you really have a lot of flexibility in the way that you go through things. I like to dual wield on like bigger bosses, ones that I can really just chew into that aren't, easy to miss with dual wield attacks. Some builds you can block counter effectively depending on the enemy, what enemy you're facing. Block counters work really well. And also getting that buff from Contagious Fury with Jellyfish Shield, giving you that extra damage, can give you, 908 attack rating, which is absolutely phenomenal, and allows you to attack almost as effectively as dual wielding with a one-handed weapon, which is great. Katanas don't have the best dual wield moveset in the game. Doesn't attack together most of the time like curved swords do or straight swords do sometimes. So dual wielding isn't super important for katanas. I think it looks awesome. It's fun to play. I like the contrasting buffs, but there are a lot of options. And again, you can two-hand a katana as well if you want to just two-hand Dragonscale Blade. I find the downside to that is that Dragonscale Blade is really short, so I prefer two-handing like a longer katana like Hand of Millennia or the Nagakiba, for instance, because you tend to hit things a lot easier. When you get close with the Uchigatana and Dragonscale Blade, you can just kind of blender things, which works really well. But you could two-hand it if you want. There is no magic involved in this spell. Some people were asking me to use like dragon incantations with it, or like the Ice Lightning Dragon spell. And there's just really not a place with this weapon, in my opinion, because you can't buff this weapon besides its own buff. And it's a quality weapon for all intents and purposes. It has dex scaling, but the dex scaling after 50 points in dex is really bad. For instance, like I think you only get like 13 points of damage from 50 to 80 dexterity. So it's like not even worth going above 50 very much. Strength actually gives better scaling at some point, and that's one of the reasons we actually have fire on the other weapon as well, is that it scales good with fire, or strength. Fire scales better with strength. So you have like a good combo of good weapon damage with both the Fire Uchigatana and the Dragonscale Blade. However, I do want to mention that if at the end of New Game Plus, or even moving into New Game Plus Plus, you could add Faith to this build and swap the fire weapon to like Flame Art or something like that, and give yourself Golden Bow and Flame Grant Me Strength to further boost your damage. Again, most of your damage is physical, and that would give you increased defenses and a way to boost your damage further, because you're kind of starting to cap out a little bit at your your damage attributes. Speaking of attributes, we have 50 Vigor, 20 Mind, 30 Endurance, 60 Strength, 60 Dexterity, 16 Intelligence, 7 Faith, and 9 Arcane. You don't need any of those last three. Again, I started as an astrologer, so those are what my stats were, but you don't need any of those last three for this build. Vigor's at 50. You'll probably want to take this up to 60 at some point. You have pretty good protection. You have about 40% resistances on physical, which is good, but you'll probably want to take that up to 60 at some point. Mind is at 20. You don't use a lot of FP with this build because you tend to buff with Dragonscale Blade or using Ice Lightning Sword to attack for 45 seconds and then reuse it again. It's only 25 FP. Same for Flaming Strike, which you don't use all the time. I would like to get Mind up to about 25 or 30 eventually, though, so this is something you'll definitely want to take up at some point. Endurance is at 30 in order to be able to medium roll while wearing all the armor that we're wearing, using the talismans we're using, and using 2 swords and a shield. If you drop the shield, for instance, or if you drop one of the katanas, you can have lower endurance, but I find the stamina is very useful for this build anyway, so it's, not bad to have. We have 60 strength and 60 dexterity here in order to balance out the strength scaling of the Fire Uchigatana and the Dragonscale Blade. As I mentioned, the Dragonscale Blade has very poor scaling and dexterity after 50 points. So even though you would think, going like, up to 80 dexterity would be better, and it does have more damage, it's not much. It's like 10 to 15 points of damage more than what you would have if you went 50-50. that's why we went the way. And the fire Uchi Katana has way more damage if you go 50-50 strength or 60-60 strength instead of like 80 dexterity and then whatever you have left into strength. So it balances out. You get more damage out of your fire Uchi Katana, like a lot more, like 120 points more versus the minus 15 from going like 80 dexterity. Moving forward, though, you will want to take these up to 80. I recommend checking out strength first and seeing how many points you're getting from strength, because I think strength might actually outperform it with the Dragonscale Blade, but it absolutely will with the fire Uchi Katana. So depending on what you're doing there, you want to check those out. But eventually you'll take those up to 80. So you got 10 points in vigor to go, probably 5 points in mind to go, and then 20 points in each of those to go. And at that point, you would probably want to go faith at least in order to get Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength in order to boost your damage. But that's probably New Game Plus Plus. Something I also want to mention about this build is that it doesn't have to be a New Game Plus build. This is just, I happen to be doing it at the end of a playthrough, and I just wanted to see if it would actually work in New Game Plus. But the Dragonscale Blade you can actually find fairly early on in the game. It doesn't have high stat requirements, and it actually does a ton of damage early on in the game because you get 160 lightning damage no matter what attributes you are. If you just meet the minimum requirements for the weapon and then buff with Ice Lightning and you keep your level low, for instance, if you're doing like invasions or something, or you want a low level co-op, you're going to absolutely devastate with this weapon. It does much better earlier on in the game than it does later in the game. So it's a really, really good early game weapon if you can get your hands on it. But I just wanted to see if I could do it in New Game Plus, and it works fine there as well. A couple of tips before I wrap up this video. If you're using the Flask of Wondrous Physique, you're going to want the one that increases your attacks as you attack repeatedly, or your attack power as you attack repeatedly, because you attack quickly with this weapon. Doesn't matter whether you're dual wielding or single handing, you're going to strike quickly in order to increase your attack power. And then if you're using a Great Rune with this build, I recommend using Radahn's Rune for this. This is going to give you FP, stamina, and health. All those are great. This isn't a super stat hungry build. You're reaching the point of capping it out. New Game Plus is probably approaching the end of this build. Maybe a New Game Plus Plus is fine if you do the Faith route as I recommended, but you probably can't play this build that well after that point. So you really don't need that many more stats, and getting the FP, stamina, and health will probably be better for you in the long run. That wraps up our Dragonscale Daimyo build. I am going to try and get the Straight Swords video done this week. I apologize for the delay. We had patch 1.07 drop right in the middle of that, and I wanted to make sure we got all the other coverage out for that, and as well as a couple new builds in. But I am working on that video. I'm hoping to have it done this week.